Welcome to the Inconvenient Minority Podcast. I'm your host, Kenny Hsu, and joining me today is author, journalist, television host, and policy advocate, John Stossel. John has been involved in many things in the free market movement, and he talks a lot about how the varying truths that are going around the world today and the lies, and he loves to separate fact from falsehood. So, John, I appreciate you coming on.
Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So, John, you have a reputation for being a libertarian, a free market person, a journalist. But how did all of that come together for you? What motivated you to get into this movement?
Discovering how stupid I was. Like most young reporters, I was a liberal, and I'd been taught in college that we're a rich country and we could tax people then government could solve all these problems. Plus, I was a consumer reporter, and I was winning Emmy Awards. I won 19 Emmy Awards criticizing business, and politicians would then say, "Oh, that was great, and we're going to pass a law to fix that." And I watched the laws make things worse. So then I figured what I believed wasn't working, and I started to read more, and I read the conservative press, and they seemed to want to go to war everywhere and to invade people's bedrooms and tell them what they can put in their bodies. Just was unsatisfying. And I discovered the libertarian magazine Reason, and that started to educate me.
So one of the things that, John, that you've been working on recently is the laws regarding marijuana legislation. And with regards to marijuana, there are debates over its efficacy. There are debates over whether people should use it or not. But you obviously argue that, we should drop dumb laws relating to marijuana legislation. So what is going on with regards to one of the articles that you've recently been doing on this topic?
Well, by article, I assume you mean my latest video, and I do release one about 6 minutes long every Tuesday. And this last one was about how stupid the legalization is. I mean, it's great that states, some of them are legalized, but some of them, because bureaucrats always want to regulate, they pass so many rules that the black market is bigger than ever. People are still getting murdered over marijuana despite it's being legal because the legal stuff costs so much more. And the worst are California and Illinois. Like California, where the idiot legislature and governor are even going to bail out the legal sellers, spend $100 million to compensate them for losing money, because every single plant has to be tracked. And there's this whole list of dumb rules that cost a fortune so that the illegal sellers are doing fine. And Illinois, where the idiot bureaucrats passed rules trying to favor former victims of the drug war and non-white people. And as a result, they've given out no new licenses so far.
Wow. This is so true because, in the name of equity, people are saying we need to give out marijuana licenses to people who have been formally convicted for drug offenses, and that tends to skew the market. And as a result, a lot of the legal, marijuana sellers, people that are trying to do it the right way, are still, boxed out of the market. And I've been doing a lot of work related to the way that this equity ideology skews free market systems, because it favors people who are simply less meritorious to do the job that they've been asked to do. And now you see it with the marijuana legislation that's been going on.
It favors people who are politically connected or who can afford to hire lawyers and fixers.
Right. Um, Politically connected. And this is another thing. So in California last year, in 2020, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but there was a movement to institute racial preferences in admissions and employment and hiring and public contracting. And you don't even have to be, and what they mean by public contracting is if you classify yourself as a Black owned business or a Latino owned business, you have the ability to get preferential treatment on government contracts simply because the head of your company is Black or Hispanic. It could be, your company could be 99% white, but if the head of your company is Black, you get preferential treatment. And so how do you feel about that?
Bad.
Yeah.
I mean, look, there's been horrible discrimination in the past, and it's true. We whites, if not you Asians, you appear to be Asian from your picture, but
Yeah.
we whites have had a head start, and so presumably I have accumulated wealth because I'm white.
Mm-hmm.
Although my parents had no money and didn't speak English when they came to America, but they did well, maybe because they weren't the victims of racism. So I understand the wish to favor those people who've historically been discriminated against. But all these rules lead to end runs around the laws. So you get these white run companies who pay some Black person a lot of money to be a token president, and they get the contract. Or children of rich, successful Black people get the contracts. The only thing that really helps the underprivileged people is free markets, because money doesn't care what color you are. It's green. And if you deliver a product or service well, you will make more money.
Now, some people would say that the structure of our economy right now is as such where the average white American has 10 times the wealth of the average Black American, which will impact all sorts of things like, access to being able to train kids and, access to, being able to own your own property and to build wealth. So they view this as kind of like a downward spiral where if things aren't corrected, then Black Americans are just going to continue to be at the bottom of the pile. But what do you say to that?
I say partly true and partly horseshit. I mean, very Black Americans from Nigeria do really well because they have a culture of education and hard work. Very poor people from Asian countries without the capital have done well. Yes, some white people have unfair advantages, but life isn't fair. I wish I were LeBron James. Equal has never been one of the choices, and we try to compensate for it already with our income tax system. If you're poor, you really don't pay any income tax. And if you're very rich, you do pay more, despite the articles suggesting they don't. Rich people also often donate to charities that try to help the people who didn't have the head start they did. But beyond those things, anything else attempted by government just becomes a bureaucratic waste of money, helping the wrong people.
Yeah. And you bring up an excellent point, which is that people come to America with zero wealth all the time. Every time an Asian immigrant lands onto American shores, they pretty much nearly always come with nothing. By nothing, I mean like maybe a few $100, maybe $1,000, but they're not crazy rich, to use a popular stereotype. And yet they're able to build wealth immediately because they are able to rely on their skills and their family structures And that is enables them to pretty much in one generation go from not even speaking English and not even, having a cent of wealth to their name, to their kids getting college educations. As Vietnamese Americans show, 80% of them don't even come with inherited with English skills. And then in one generation, their kids graduate from college at a higher rate than white Americans do. So given the problem then of sort of the social stratification of wealth, or what other people, try to claim as a narrative of the social stratification of wealth, you argue that the best course of action is to just let free markets do their work.
Yes, but a graduated income tax is also helpful too. So
yeah,
we richer people pay more than average.
But do you buy the argument that says even the rich people exploit a lot of tax loopholes to avoid paying their so-called fair share of income?
Yes and no. We use every loophole that we can. We're stupid if we don't. These loopholes are put in there by politicians, supposedly because they have some benefit, encourage people to invest in this or that. So we're suckers if we don't use them. But we still pay more in taxes than poor people do.
I think the top 10% of Americans pay 80% of the taxes in America.
Yeah, but be careful because that's the income tax, but the sales taxes hit the poor pretty hard.
Yeah. So you would support lowering the sales tax?
Yes.
Yeah. This is interesting. This is an interesting picture of American society, of a future American society that would intrigue my listeners, because we've been discussing a lot of things about meritocracy and free markets, and some people say that it tends to privilege the rich, but if you had a graduated income tax, you lowered the sales tax, and presumably you would reform the entitlement system, then you allow the poor to have a great opportunity to succeed in their country.
I mean, what would really help the poor is if there were fewer rules that prevented them from opening a little store and entering the marketplace. But look, when people are free, some clever people are going to get absurdly rich. There will always be, there'll be more Mark Zuckerbergs and Jeff Bezos. And I mean, who gives a shit? By and large, they're producing stuff that we want. And if they get a zillion times richer and the average person gets 2% richer, aren't we all better off? 2% is better than nothing. And throughout tens of thousands of years of history, there was nothing before capitalism. Capitalism created wealth, and with it, inequities. And even though it may make some people envy their neighbors because it was nicer when we were all poor together, we are better off when the rich are filthy rich and the poor get a little richer. And there is mobility between the groups. Every year, the children of the super rich snort it up their nose and waste the money and fall out of the top quintile. And every year, people in the bottom quintile move to the next quintile. And some move from bottom all the way to the top.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. What do you think about the credentialing system in America? That is, there's a few more jobs now in America, or a lot of so-called prestigious jobs that require kind of expensive credentialing licenses. And what do you think about that system?
That's unfortunate. I think liberal arts colleges like the one I attended are an absurd bubble
Yeah.
subsidized by government and government loans, and it will pop. And half the people who attend don't enjoy the learning process and don't get their money's worth. So it's bad that people feel you have to have a college degree.
Which is even worse, right? Yeah.
If an airline wants to say, well, we're not going to make money if our pilots crash our airlines, they would have their own credentialing system and they would make sure it was pretty good. But now, when these big associations do it, it's not very accurate. And we always assume, well, you're going to go to a doctor who doesn't have a degree. But that's because it's hard for people to imagine what would exist if government hadn't taken it over. If government weren't approving dentists and doctors and lawyers, then private groups would spring up like Consumer Reports or Best Buy that would rate doctors. And now with the internet, you have even more ways of doing that. And that would be far more accurate than these bureaucratic blunt instruments that they call licenses.
So liberals would complain that private credentialing industries like Consumer Reports, and then could potentially lean into corruption or partner with big business to take out the common man. One common example is before the 2008 financial crash, Moody's and Standard and Poor often rated these very distressed assets. Nevertheless, they rated them high ratings. Some people thought that it was because they were in cahoots with the big businesses. What do you think about that?
I don't think they were in cahoots. It's true. They do spend time listening to the big businesses. But 2 points. One, at the time, it was a frenzy. Every price was going up. And people felt they were suckers if they didn't keep investing because their neighbor was making money. And if any of these rating services are corrupt, then people will find out eventually and they'll go out of business. People won't trust them anymore. But when government is corrupt, it never goes out of business. Okay, every 4 years or so, you elect a new leader. But if the bureaucracy is corrupt, they go on forever and ever. You have the most corruption in places like the Soviet Union, where everybody worked for the government, and the way to get ahead was to know somebody. I'm working on one video now where in Georgia, the former Soviet colony, they said they were going to form an anti-corruption commission. And I know this guy who'd be great for it, my friend, and he had to pay $10,000 to get on the commission. I mean, that's how rife government is with corruption.
Yeah, it's like people think that the government is going to be the uncorrupted savior of all of these corrupt establishments, which is just idiotic to think about. Last question for you, John. And I wanted to thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it. But last sort of point for you is, where do you think we are right now? The United States is right now. Do you think that we are better than we were 20 years ago in terms of the depth of regulations, or do you think that we are continuing or are spending ourselves into a hole that we're not going to get out of?
That we're spending ourselves into a hole. I don't think I can say we're not going to get out of it, but the rubber band can stretch only so far before it snaps. The regulations keep growing. Trump slowed the growth some, but he didn't stop the natural progress of things, as Thomas Jefferson called it, because if you're an EPA regulator and you think you're not passing a new regulation, you think you're not doing your job. And no high school student visits the state legislature and asks their congressman, well, what laws have you repealed? It's all, what laws have you passed? So the machine does more all the time. so far, the animal spirits of our amazing economy has kind of kept up with that. But now, old people like me rudely refuse to die, and we collect our Social Security and Medicare, even though we're getting 3 times back what we paid in. People think, oh, I'm just getting back in what was deducted, but we get back much more. And that's unsustainable. There aren't going to be enough of you young people to pay my Social Security and Medicare in the future. How is the government just going to print more money like Biden's doing now and the Fed's doing now? And so to go buy a loaf of bread, you'll have to bring a wheelbarrow filled with money. I don't know. Maybe that generally is how these things end. That's why I bought Bitcoin.
Here we go. This is an advertisement for Bitcoin.
No, I wouldn't buy it now. It's pretty high now. But
I would not buy it now.
It's certainly smart to hedge. Hedge, you're going to believe in something that has limited supply, or you're going to believe politicians printing pieces of paper with dead presidents on them.
Real quick, Andrew Yang, when he ran for president in 2020, said that in his book that we are heading towards a society where there will be a small number of people who are super productive, but then most Americans are going to be pretty much left in the dust as their jobs get automated. Do you believe that that's in our future?
No, it's always been predicted, but it's pretty amazing that we've had all this innovation, robots, and unemployment remains at about 5%. When America began, 92% of the people worked on farms. 90% of them lost their farm jobs because of machines, but they found other work. Secretaries, typewriter sellers. People find other work. Now you can say, well, this time is different because of artificial intelligence, and maybe it is, but that's been predicted 1,000 times and it's never come true.
My guest today is John Stossel. You're listening to the Inconvenient Minority Podcast. And if you like this episode, subscribe, leave a review. And John, I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, John.